Transfer portal is closed, even though you keep seeing headlines every day because technically guys can still be in and come out of it and sign with schools. But I think we're way far enough into it now where we can talk about winners, got a couple of losers here, and then I got three teams that I don't really know how to classify them. So solid winners. Indiana finished with the number 1 class in the portal. LSU finished with the number 2 class in the portal. Unequivocally, these are home run classes, and Indiana's going to be a mainstay in this conversation. All right, so Indiana added 17 kids. Now, what I choose to look at right now is I don't just look at the numbers that you're adding and the numbers that are leaving, because sometimes you can add half as many as leave, but you upgraded your roster because in the net you added a higher caliber athlete and you let a lot of guys walk. So at Indiana, I imagine some of that happened. What I choose to do is I choose to go over to On3 and I look at the average player grade. Case by case, yes, there will be oversights or maybe an exception to the rule, but general rule, those player grades are a really good gauge. So with Indiana, they added 17 kids. The average grade of the kid they added is 76.7. The average grade of the kid they're losing is 62.7. So they are adding high-level players at the expense of maybe shaving off some of the underbelly of their roster. And they got Josh Hoover, the quarterback from TCU, and they totally revamped that skill group. I'm really high on Nick Marsh, who's a wide receiver from Penn State. We were talking about this time last year. It's just Penn State screwed it up in every way. Or what did I say, Penn State? I told you, man, too much influence. Michigan State. It is true that I was talking about Nick Marsh a whole lot, all for naught, as it turns out, this time last year. So it's just, I need delayed gratification on Nick Marsh. LSU added, they added a lot, man. LSU, on this piece of paper here, I will make the case why a lot of other people are looking at the LSU class and saying, you know, that class right there, they killed it. Now, you may think if you don't really follow this stuff a lot, of course LSU killed it. They got Lane Kiffin, they got a lot of money. Yeah, again, it's the caliber of player that you add and how complementary is it to your needs. So, of course, they had a need at quarterback. They added the number 1 quarterback, number 1 and number 5 edge players, the number 2 offensive tackle. Since we last spoke, they did sign Jordan Seaton. They got the number 4 wide receiver. They got the number 4 inside offensive lineman. And honestly, those are going to be the headline grabbers. But if you look at their overall class, I think they added like 40 kids. If you look at the overall class, Eugene Wilson is a perfect example of, to me, how underrated the depth of that class is. Because there are a lot of guys that are not rated in maybe top 10 at their position or top 50 overall, but you look and you say, I remember that name. I remember that name a few years ago. And for whatever reason, so far their career hasn't worked out, maybe because they were a bad fit somewhere, or in Wilson's case, it's just if he's healthy. If he's healthy, he can be a star. So I'm looking at all the big-time names they added. I'm also thinking about what could be at the second and third levels of that class from a ratings perspective. The entire state of Texas, well, not the entire state. There are several dots in the state of Texas. There are several green check marks in the state of Texas. Texas Tech, number 3 class in the portal. Texas A&M, number 4 class in the portal. Houston, number 7 class in the portal. Texas, number 9 class in the portal. Tech and A&M both added 6 blue chippers apiece. Texas Tech's going to do this every cycle, but I think A&M really made some underrated moves there. I think I say that a lot about Mike Elko. I just really trust their evaluation there, and then I trust the development once they get there. Texas, though, that was probably the biggest headline grabber because they added Cam Coleman, Hollywood Smothers, and Raleek Brown. So 2 big-time tailback additions. They just overhauled their running back room. And they got Rasheem Biles, who was a linebacker out of Pitt, who's a really good player. Texas every year is going to do the same thing, but you're not used to talking about Houston. And I'm telling you, I want to tell you, I may not be the first if you follow this stuff closely, but I really want to warn everyone, there are many out there who kind of follow the portal. And so you knew LSU was going to make big moves. And Texas Tech's always going to be there. Texas is always going to be there. But did you expect Houston to be there? Because Houston's got the number 7 class in the transfer portal right now. And they got Keyshawn Henderson, who is a 5-star quarterback in recruiting. So they've got their quarterback of the future. And then they pair that with 17 new additions. Average player grade of guys they added is over 70. The average grade of kids who left, 62.4. I think Houston made some really good moves here. And you remember, or maybe you don't remember, I'll tell you, this past cycle where there were a lot of coaching moves. Hey guys, do me one favor. Check and see if you're subscribed to the channel. If you are, great. If you're not, it's that easy. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't sign you up for anything. It just helps us do the show this way forever. All right, back to the clip. Willie Fritz's name was out there. He didn't go anywhere. Willie Fritz's name was out there. So just keep an eye on Houston. It's a Big 12 team now. It's not a G5 team anymore. For a couple of years, they've been Big 12, but they haven't made a ton of noise. So people kind of still, I think, associate Houston with like non-Power 4 type vibes. No, they're in it. Like if they win the Big 12, they're guaranteed a playoff spot. Iowa State has to be considered a big loser here through no fault of their own, which is kind of why I was telling Jesse earlier, I don't like doing transfer portal loser segments because normally all it is for the losers is just a bunch of places where they lost their coach. So Iowa State lost Matt Campbell and they had 54 kids leave and they had 48 come in. But the caliber of player they lost, like they lost 7 4-star rated players. They added 1 of that classification. And just to Penn State, they lost QB1, wide receiver 1 and 2. They lost a starting guard, RB1, tight end 1 and 2, an edge, corner 1. They lost 3 linebackers. They lost 2 safeties. That's just to Penn State. So I don't really think many of us love that college football is allowed to operate that way right now, but it does. So if you want to call Iowa State a loser, yeah, they're worse off now than they were. Loser has a kind of connotation like, oh, you screwed up. They didn't screw up anything. It just is the way it is. Now, USC and Georgia and Alabama are 3 teams that are not ranked in the top 45. And they're big brands, right? And so you would think, oh, that means they're losers. I don't really know that I call Bama or Georgia or USC a loser here. What I think they are is I think there are programs here that recruit very well. They all are in love with the recent signing classes that they added. I think they all inevitably, at the end of every year, have a certain portion of the roster they need to shave off, just kind of dead money. In this new era now, it used to be, look, if you recruited a kid out of high school and he's a bust, that's your fault. That's your poor evaluation or development. He's going to stay on the roster and he never really starts or anything, but he rolls through there 4 years and he's done. Well, now, if you paid him $200,000 out of high school and he's expecting bumps and you're not ready to give it to him, those are the kind of players who walk now. Is that a loss? Is that a lot? You're not fighting at all. In fact, you're kind of encourage them. Hey, there's the door right there. We'll help you. We'll pack your bags for you. Well, that's not a loss. I think a lot of that happened at USC. I just think they recruited over some of their roster. I think that happens every year at Georgia. I think that just happened at Alabama. So I really think that those rosters in the net are probably better than they were at the end of the season. Therefore, I don't really call them losers. They're not in the top 45, but I don't call them losers. And then we got new head coaches at places like Penn State and Virginia Tech and Oklahoma State that are kind of importing their system. We just mentioned Matt Campbell going to Penn State. They retained fairly well on the roster they inherited, but they really portaled well. They brought just about every piece that they really trust to play Big Ten caliber football with them from Iowa State. But then James Franklin leaves Penn State and he goes to Virginia Tech, and they've got the number 6 portal class there. And the average grade of player on that roster, additions versus subtractions, is up 6.5 points. So they've immediately upgraded the caliber of roster. They take a really big bump up, I think, at quarterback. I mean, Grunkermeyer is, I think, a substantial improvement over what they, not what they inherited, because Drones was moving on anyway. But Eric Morris is another one. Like, this is going to be really, really interesting for a team that was 1-11 last year at Oklahoma State. Eric Morris comes there, and it would have been crazy to say this in the old days being like 2018. But Eric Morris came from a better program, like a higher performing program. North Texas was a better team and a higher performing program last year than Oklahoma State was. So he comes there. And there's, of course, a much higher ceiling at Oklahoma State than there is North Texas. But when he brought Mestemaker with him and Caleb Hawkins as running back, and they added 17 guys from North Texas, they're adding 17 guys from what was unequivocally a better team than Oklahoma State. So in the Big 12, I know it looked like there was a little more distance, a little more gap between the haves and the have-nots last year. That could have been a one-off. Any given year, this conference could go full-on accordion contraction. It could go total parity mode. And this conference is notorious for teams making big leaps. So I'd look at Oklahoma State this year, as soon as this year.